Have you ever wondered what makes some coffee taste good and some coffee taste like pure poop? Here's the thing, I think that most people don't care. And if they do, they realize that most good coffee will ultimately cost more money. Here's what I also think. We go to bed and wake up just to inhale coffee and not give ourselves a second to think about what we're actually drinking. Because we're so occupied thinking about our day or doing our work. And I think that's just a disservice to the coffee bean. So hear me out. What if we can actually find a way to understand the coffee bean better and make the best cup of coffee on a budget that doesn't include an $80 bag of coffee? You into that?
I know I am.
Thank you for choosing Starbucks. Let me get started for you today.
What's going on? I'm gonna get a small black coffee.
So I think the best place to start to answer this question as well
Tell you're in a fancy coffee shop when you actually have a roaster in the coffee shop.
I think it's really funny how like cheapest to most expensive, you can definitely see in terms of like their perceived value, how they're more expensive. So you have the gas station coffee, which is like, you know, styrofoam, the lid comes off a few times. Then you got the most expensive, which is definitely like, I mean, anytime that you have a coffee mug or a coffee cup with no logo, you know it's fancy, you know it's fancy. And then you got the Starbucks, classic, gotta go with the Starbucks. For the sake of this, I got 3 different coffees. Let's see how they taste and kind of see if we can kind of figure something out. Honestly, the Cumberland coffee from the gas station, and surprisingly the most expensive one, the J. Renee's coffee, they kind of taste the same, which is fascinating to me. And they kind of taste like super burnt. Like, I think the water was really hot. I think it caused the coffee to taste a little more burnt. I don't taste like the coffee, if that makes sense. It's interesting how, we all trash on Starbucks. But honestly, I do see that this being the best tasting. It tasted more neutral, whereas the other two tasted very burnt or a little too bitter for me. This one, the Starbucks, actually tasted more neutral to me. After drinking all 3 of these, they don't really show me what makes coffee taste good versus coffee taste bad. So we gotta dive even deeper. I'm at the grocery store, so the reason I'm at the grocery store is because they have all these coffees. I think it's a good way to kind of like read the descriptions to kind of figure out what makes good coffee taste good. So going to a grocery store that has a full variety of different types of coffees, I noticed that the price range usually varied from $3 to about $12. So when I was looking through these coffees, I found something that was really interesting. Coffee brands like Maxwell Coffee or Cafe Bustola, they only showcased an ingredient of 100% coffee. And that really confused me because I was confused, like, what other situation is there not 100% coffee? Another thing I noticed was that most of the coffee that I saw at this particular grocery store came from the origins of Mexico, Colombia, Guatemala, Brazil, Costa Rica. Out of all the coffee brands, I only found one that actually showed the elevation of the actual bean being grown in. And I think that's really important in terms of the different flavors that actually come from the coffee bean itself. I also found a coffee brand that actually showcases when they actually roasted the actual bean itself, which is really interesting because you can see the same type of coffee, but they have different roasting dates. And I realized that for me to best understand this and what makes other coffees taste good versus other coffees taste bad, I had to buy a few different brands and go home and compare them. So essentially what I did was I picked up the Folgers coffee, I picked up Pete's coffee, and I picked up the Atomic Coffee Roaster. But there's a reason why I bought these particular brand. For example, the Folgers brand, I noticed how it visibly showed what kind of roast it was made in. So a thing I learned about roasts, 3 different types of roasts. There's a light roast, there's a medium roast, and there's a dark roast. A light roast actually has the most amount of coffee. Light roasts are not heated up in that big machine that you see in this video clip here. So essentially it doesn't have the time to pull out the caffeine and that acidic flavor, so it keeps that flavor in there. So light roast will have that type of flavor note to it, whereas medium roast, it's kind of balanced, so it has the perfect blend. And then when you go to a coffee shop, you'll see that they have a house blend. That's usually a medium. And then you have the dark roast, which if you have ever gotten a dark roast bean, it kind of has like that oily texture to it, mainly because it's had the time to kind of pull out that caffeine, that acidity, and it's had the time to kind of caramelize the sugars in the coffee bean, which gives you that more dark, bold flavor that people enjoy in a dark roast. And then the reason I bought the Pete's coffee was actually because I immediately saw that they showed the roasted date, which is fascinating because I haven't had any coffee brand that actually shows when the coffee bean itself has been roasted. From my research, I realized that if you can get a coffee bag that actually showcases when the coffee bean was roasted, that's a really good indication of how fresh the coffee is. The reason I bought the Atomic Coffee Roasters blend, one, it just looks like a cool bag. It's really, you know, appealing. But that's not the main reason why I bought it. The main reason I bought it was when I flipped it around to the back, I noticed that it showcases the elevation that the coffee bean was grown in. Since this coffee brand was grown at the elevation of 1,200 to 1,600 meters, it kind of will give you the flavor of a chocolatey, citrus, vanilla, and a sweet type of profile. So it'll be a combination of that. All right, so the first coffee that we're gonna experiment with is this one right here, the Folgers. That was a fail. So yeah, the initial reviews on the Folgers, right when you're smelling it, it definitely does smell like very cheap coffee. Maybe I'm biased because I already know how cheap it is. But if you just kind of look at the kind of the grains itself.
One of the things, I'm not a coffee expert, but one of the things I noticed is that it's not fully uniform. It's kind of uneven a little bit. Again, it probably has to do with like, they just assume that you're just gonna put this into a coffee maker, whereas I'm gonna be using a French press. So the flavors of this will already be kind of a little skewed.
You know, when I'm usually putting my hot water into the French press with the coffee grounds, it usually smells really good. This just doesn't smell good at all. I can't even tell, it does smell like a burnt tire type of smell. So, all right, 4 minutes on the clock, let it brew. And let's see how it looks once we pour it out. So just from initial pour into the mug, I noticed something, which was the color of the coffee itself, the water. It is super light. It doesn't have that like dark coffee look to that water. Let's try it out. So it's a few things. For some reason, I think Folgers coffee grinds the coffee beans to a different size, so I definitely felt a little bit of the coffee ground in here, even though it's supposed to filter it through the machine. My French press isn't broken, it's just that it's really bad. It kind of like dries out your throat as it's going down, which is not ideal. And then also, again, I think it's just a combination of not having the right coffee beans. I think, so what I mean by that is, there's two types of coffee beans. There's Robusta and then there's Arabica. So pretty much the Robusta, I can't pronounce these words for the life of me. Just deal with it for the sake of what I'm trying to explain here. So Robusta coffee is more on the cheaper end. It's kind of mass produced, and to kind of bring down the cost of coffee, which Folgers, you know, $4 for that whole thing, most likely is probably combining Robusta coffee beans with Arabica coffee beans to kind of give it that blend. Just a theory of mine, because this tastes like a burnt tire, and Robusta definitely does have that more burnt tire type of flavor to it. And then, yeah, it's just not that great. It's terrible, actually. All right, I'm really excited about Pete's coffee. I've had it in the past. It's generally pretty good coffee, I think, for the price that you're paying for. You know, $7-8 for this. It was also roasted like 3 weeks ago, which means that it's relatively fresh. So let's open it up. Oh my god, oh my god. Alright, so first off, this smells significantly a lot better than the Folgers coffee for good reason.
Coffee bean is evenly blended all the way through, so like you can see that everything is kind of uniform. It looks good. Whereas if you compare that to Folgers, you can tell that it's kind of not even. So this is Folgers. That's Pete's coffee.
Yep, it smells a lot better. Let's put this in. Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Smells a lot better. Okay, so this definitely tastes a lot better. Doesn't have that burnt taste to it. It definitely looks like actual coffee, whereas the Folgers did not. It's super dark. You know, again, Pete's coffee is kind of grounded for the sake of a coffee machine. I use the French press, so granted, that will kind of skew up how the flavor profile actually is, but honestly, it tastes great. I've been smelling this for a few days, waiting to do the shot, and it smells so freaking good. There it is. Alright, so if you take a look at the coffee beans itself,
If you look at the coffee beans, this is why you should try to get coffee beans that aren't like this and not like when it's already grounded like that, because then you can actually like get a really fresh cup of coffee. First off, medium roast, you can tell there's no oil on the surfaces of this, which, you know, reaffirms that it is a medium roast.
This coffee, I think there's a lot of factors that go into why this coffee, I think, has the best flavor. As soon as you put it in, the flavor just kind of like, kind of explodes into your mouth. You could almost taste exactly how they describe the flavor tone to be. It has a lot of chocolatey, nutty tones to it. It goes down very smooth. I'll be perfectly honest, like I could probably drink this without any cream and sugar. The Pete's coffee and then the Folgers, obviously, those two I would probably have to enhance it by adding cream and sugar. This one, you can just smell it. It smells so good. So where do we go from here? I think the biggest thing I think I've learned from this whole experience is that each coffee brand that I presented didn't have the 100% what I would probably want to look at when I'm buying coffee. The first thing is, try to buy coffee that is a whole bean and buy yourself a cheap blender. The blenders cost like $20. They're very inexpensive, but what that allows you to do is actually get a fresh cup of coffee because you're blending it and then you're pouring in into the coffee maker or the French press or whatever. It is very effective and you'll get those flavors. Whereas if you do get coffee that's kind of already ground, you're losing that flavor each day that it kind of is just sitting there. Second thing, always look for when it was roasted, if you can. So Atomic Coffee didn't have that. Pete's Coffee did have that. And third, when you're going to the coffee shop, don't just buy any coffee that is cheap or whatever, or it looks aesthetically pleasing. Look at the flavor profile. I think that's very important. So for example, the Atomic Coffee had a very nutty, chocolatey tone to it, whereas the Pete's Coffee really didn't have that. It was more of a smooth flavor. So each coffee is created differently. So it's very important to focus on what flavor do you really enjoy. You know, if you've watched up to this point and you're still like, you know what, Herschel, I'm not going to do this. If you've been drinking Folgers and you want to keep drinking Folgers, go for it. But I think you should put some thought into what's going into your coffee mug and then ultimately what you're drinking. So, bottoms up. Wait, that's an analogy for beer, right?